Alrighty, so before this video begins, there is a new code. Sorry about how it looks on the screen. I cannot have it full screen because I can't actually operate my OBS unless I have it like this. But if we go to the notice and then we head all the way down to CD, key redemption, and we tap to enter, when we had this pop-up thing, we're just going to put in this code right here, which is NKTH14 Romance V. Redeem now. Success. Close it, and then you're going to actually head to this is where I can open up this one. Actually, you're going to head back to your mailbox and you're going to get 100 gems. Hey, free 100 gems in my opinion. Go ahead and get that code right now. Alrighty, so obviously after Anchor Aftermath, and I know it's a bit silly talking about this right before like Anchor even drops, but I do think it is important, right? Because they kind of told us how like this year is gonna go throughout. I want to say starting the end of December, really Nikke really told us how all of 2025 is going to go, right? The only thing I don't know what's going to happen is one collab. There's like going to be another collab within this year, so we're gonna have 3 collabs this year. There's gonna be one more collab this year that I don't know the idea of, but we know the first one, which is the next collab, is going to be Evangelion Part 2, and then we know obviously the other collab of the year, whether it's in May or whether it's in September, is going to be Evangelion, right? But there should be another collab between those 2 periods, and I don't know what that collab is going to be, also when it's going to be for real. But today I want to talk about the Evangelion collab because I do think it's important. I want to talk about, obviously the characters, the old characters, and like the value they have today, and then also what I think the new characters should add into the game, right? Because I feel like collab characters are cool and all, but if they're not useful, then I don't really see why you're gonna use them, right? Like obviously if we take a look at the previous collab, which was Evangelion again, which is so funny we're getting that again, Asuka and Rei and Maru were all like somewhat not game-changing characters, but very good additions to the game, right? And the reason why I want to talk about this is because after Anchor, I believe the next event update should be the collab, right? It is February 2nd now, and we still don't have Anchor, right? Anchor would last 2 weeks. If another banner was to come out in February, it would go all the way up until March, and there would be no room for a collab. So my understanding is that after this Anchor and Mass banner, we are going to have the Evangelion collab. So yeah, I'm going to talk about obviously Asuka, Maru, and Rei first, the old collab characters right now. Talk about where they stand in the game and if you should summon for them and get them if you don't already have them, especially with the new additions into the game. And then I'm going to be talking about what I really think the other 2, which is the eye patch Asuka and then the Tencent, Tenevent Rei. It's another Rei, right? What I think they should really do for coming into the game. So obviously let's talk about Asuka first. Now I think Asuka is the strongest character out of the 3. I think the best character out of the 3 was Maru in a support sense. I think Rei was second in terms of actual usability, and then I think Asuka was third, because you're not using Asuka unless you're fighting something where she's type advantage against. I'm using Rei to buff up fire characters, so I guess you could say the same thing about Rei. And then Maru, it's like I'm not using her because she's a hand-me-down crown, but if I do need another team that has that type of support, I am putting Maru on the team, right? Obviously Asuka, a very, very powerful character. She is a powerful DPS. She has damage a strong element for 10 seconds when you enter a full burst, and if there's a shield on her, which Rei is the character who's supposed to give her a shield, but obviously because you have Crown as well, Crown can give her a shield as well. Just when she gets healed, she gets a crazy attack buff for 25 seconds, which is just beyond crazy. And then she does have a buff towards damage, or damage out to shields, right? Which is at almost 500% just at level 5. It's quite crazy, right? And then her burst skill, she gets the pierce effect, attack damage over 100%. She starts healing herself, hit rate, like she just does too much, right? And then damage done when attacking core, also when entering a full burst, and that's a buff towards all fire code allies. I don't really think that's that crazy of a buff, where it's like, oh, I need to have her for fire code allies. I don't. but I do think the character itself as a main staple, like fire DPS, yeah, I think you need her. One thing about her especially is that she is fire, and so is the new Red Hood Rappy, right? And I know it's like, okay, like I said, Mari isn't really doing much for just fire code allies in general, but now having that composition of Red Hood Rappy and Mari is very good, right? Like, I want to say fire before the collab was a good class, right? Because they had Modernia, Alice, A2. Really, those are like the only 3 DPSs I would say. But now we have Ray, Asuka, and then Red Hood Rappy as well, right? But I do think if you don't have Asuka, I think you should get her, because your team most likely should be Red Hood Rappy, Asuka, and then Modernia as the Flex Burst 3 character, or it should be Red Hood Rappy, Ray, who is buffing up Red Hood Rappy a lot more than Asuka, and then Modernia, right? And speaking of Ray, what Ray ends up doing is, again, she's more of like a buff towards fire characters, right? So when you use her burst skill, she's giving a shield and an attack damage buff for 10 seconds to fire code allies, right? She does deal AoE damage, but in my opinion, it's nothing too crazy. I know it says 800% at level 5, but her damage seems to be like a hit or miss sometimes. It's decent when she's type advantage, obviously, right? And then she also has the same effect where she does more damage to shields. And then when you enter the stage, burst 3 stage, all fire code allies get an attack buff. So every burst rotation, she's giving an attack buff as an attacker, by the way, to fire code allies. Like, she's pretty good in doing that, right? And then she does have strong element as damage a strong element for herself every 3 seconds for after landing 100 normal attacks, which is fine because she's a machine gun. And then after landing 100 normal attacks, whatever enemy she's hitting within the nearest to the crosshair, whatever, she is dealing additional damage, right? But her main buffs are obviously going to be the shield, the attack damage, and then also just the attack buff when entering the burst stage 3. So whether you're using her burst skill or whether she's just on the team, she is going to actually be buffing fire code allies specifically with these little buffs. And I do think it's a good addition, because if you are going to be using her as a quote-unquote mainstay DPS, a mainstay burst 3 DPS, she is going to be doing damage. Don't get me wrong, Ray does damage. Is it as crazy as Asuka's? No, but she does do good damage. My thing is, if you are going to be using her, you're mainly putting her on the team as a sub DPS. That's exactly what I would say she is, right? I would say she's a sub DPS, a supporter first, then a DPS. And I know it sounds crazy to say because her kit looks just DPS, but for me, I feel like I'm putting her on the team because she's a supporter first, then a DPS, right? So do you need her? Probably, I would say to get her over, like, I would say to get her just because, again, nowadays Red Hood Rappy, Modernia, but remember, you cannot fit all these characters on a team, right? Like, if you're putting these characters on a team, especially if you're splitting Asuka and Ray, like, what they wanted you to do was have Asuka and Ray on the same team, right? Asuka is the main DPS and can help support, but Ray has all the stuff that Asuka needs to be the best she can be, right? But if you are going to pull these two characters and split them up and pair them with like Red Hood Rappy and Modernia, then it's like you only need to get one of the two. And then I would say get Asuka, right? Red Hood Rappy is way too strong, already has support for the team. Asuka, again, way too powerful, and then Modernia, also way too powerful, in my opinion. So I would say go for them. In terms of getting Ray, if you really need a fire code supporter, then by all means, but I feel like you don't necessarily need her. In the long run, she would be better because, yeah, she's a support DPS, sure. But I would say in terms of just damage, you probably want it to be Red Hood Rappy, Asuka, Modernia, right? That's just my opinion, right? And then when it comes to Mari, I would say Mari, the character, you should have a very good buffer, right? When it comes to Pierce, that's kind of her main thing. When she hits the enemy's core, she just gives a Pierce damage buff. So for characters like Red Hood, especially, Mari is so good with Red Hood because Red Hood has Pierce the entire game, right? So having Pierce the entire game and then giving a Pierce damage buff basically the entire time when attacking an enemy's core, if they have a core and you hit that every time, that's quite the combination. Not only that, she does give all allies the damage dealt 2 shields, 77% for 3 seconds when landing an attack with a full charge, which is great. I never really found like that damage to delta shields that useful, just because like I haven't really fought enemies that have shields like with these characters specifically, but it doesn't change the fact that that pierce damage buff permanently is good. Like pierce teams are really making a way into the game, and if you are going to be running a pierce team, whether you have Zxous as your burst 1 and then you have Red Hood as your burst 3, Mari's gonna find a way on that team because she has permanent pierce buffs, right? Not only that, after the first 10 seconds of a battle, every other 10 seconds she's giving an attack, or every other 5 seconds basically, she's giving an attack buff to all allies and then an attack buff to herself with the pierce effect. So she is very powerful, as well as a burst 2 sub DPS again, right? And then her burst skill, every 20 seconds an attack damage buff of 31%. That's kind of the same thing as crowns, but crown gives a shield as well, right? That's the crown gives a shield as well. That's all that was, right? 36% at level 10 for 15 seconds, but she gives a shield. The only thing is if you heal ally or crown, she gives another attack damage buff for 7 seconds, and then if you enter the full burst and you use your burst skill, you get an attack buff, right? So that's what we call her Mari, a hand-me-down version of Crown, because she kind of has the exact same kit as Crown without the shield. It's just lower percentages, right? Like the attack damage buff actually would be higher than Crown's, sure, but Crown's lasts for 15 seconds. So yeah, the attack damage buff is really good, right? But this right here, the second skill, is nothing like Crown's. It kind of is, kind of isn't, but it's way less. And then the pierce damage buff is very good as well, right? So yeah, I would say Mari is like, out of all 3 of them, this is the character you want to get 100%, right? I think Asuka and Rei has gotten more value just because of Red Hood Rappy and wanting to buff up Red Hood Rappy and still have good DPSs. I feel like Asuka and Rei have went up in value just a tiny bit, and I would probably prefer Asuka to put on that team. But it doesn't change the fact that Mari, just in general, for regular supporting on another team, guaranteed you're putting on a team, especially if you're running the Pierce team, you want Mari. So that's my little opinion about the 3 characters. And then for the new characters, I really think Wind like is what I wanted them to go as, but I feel like now with Mana, it's kind of guaranteed Scarlet and Mana is like the Wind duo. You don't really need another one, right? Like you really don't need another team right there, right? Actually, I could do Blanc, Noir, Mana, Scarlet. That is already 4 characters right there, and that would work too, right? Same thing with Rosanna. Like I feel like Mana and Scarlet is the duo for Wind, so I don't really need Wind DPSs anymore. But if they are going to drop one of the new characters and make them a DPS, I would have wanted them in Wind. I would have wanted them in Water as well, because Water does have obviously Ludmilla, Guillotine, and now favorite item Helm. But other than that, they still don't really have DPSs like that. So I do feel like Water, even though Water is getting a crazy buff lately with Anchor, Mask, and stuff like that, I do feel like Water still needs some type of like major DPS. They really don't have a major DPS. Like when you look at Wind, Scarlet Black Shadow. When you look at Fire, Red Hood Rappy, Modernia. When you look at Electric, Cinderella, Maidens, Wise, Anise, right? These are main DPS, like crazy powerful DPSs. When you look at Iron, Laplace, Red Hood, who else is there? Probably just those 2, maybe Snow White to an extent. That's kind of a reach, but not really. Yeah, Water doesn't have a crazy powerful like mainstay DPS besides Ludmilla, and I only say Ludmilla because she's the strongest out of all of them, right, in terms of damage. So yeah, I think Water could really use a main staple, powerful, OP powerful DPS. I think Water could use that, and I know Water has been getting a lot of buffs like I said, but Water can use that, right? So if they are going to make a DPS out of this collab, please place them in Water. Overpowered DPS, put them in Water. And then if you're going to make a support, I do feel like it doesn't really make sense to have another Evangelion collab and make another fire support. I feel like Wind could use a support now, right? With that Mana Scarlet comp, you could work on that Wind. Iron has too much. Crown and Litter is too much. They don't need anything. They don't need anything. They have way too much. And then electric, they also have way too much. So I feel like slap them either in wind or water if you're going to buff them. Right, based on typings, because that was like the main thing with the last collab, right? With Ray and Asuka, they were fire buffers, and then Mari was a pierce buffer, right? They were buffers for specific things. This time around, if you are going to make them a buffer for a specific thing, make them a buffer for wind or water, and if they're DPS, just slap them in water. That's what I would like. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys want. Let me know if the code at the beginning of the video was helpful for you guys, and I will leave that in the pinned comment. Your boy Zxous, I'm out. Peace.